Hey everyone, this is Jairo Morales from The Grind Fitness and welcome to my channel. On this channel, you're gonna learn how to take care of your body while we do this wonderful sport called Jiu-Jitsu. Everything from joint strength training classes to mobility classes, as well as yoga and many other professionals to teach you what is the best path for you and your Jiu-Jitsu journey. If you haven't already, please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. You know what to do. Share this with somebody if you think this might help the community to be able to take care of their body for their journey on Jiu-Jitsu. Oos, guys. Hope to see you on the mat. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in today. So today we are talking with Dr. Daniel Komfort. Am I saying that right?
That's right, man.
He's a doctor in physical therapy. Basically, he's going to kind of walk through like the basic fundamentals of how to like take care of our joints. Any of you that do jiu-jitsu know that basically that's the principle of jiu-jitsu is joint breaking and strangulation. So this kind of stuff is not just important, it's vital for the longevity of the sport. If anybody here is watching that is on the younger side, you may not see the importance of this in your 20s, but it's going to pay off when you're 30 and 40. If you're starting jiu-jitsu and you're in your 30s and 40s, this is stuff that in order for you to do jiu-jitsu effectively and efficiently, you're going to have to be a little bit more joint aware, because as we get older, we move less, which means our joint capacity and actual workspace gets diminished over time. So these are things that you got to kind of work on as you train. It's just going to reduce injury. It's going to increase muscle recruitment, all kinds of other stuff. Anyways, but let's hand it over to Daniel. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, just to kind of introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're at, where you're located, and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Danny. I am a physical therapist based out of right outside Orlando, Florida. I've been practicing since 2020. I graduated with my doctorate. Been in the orthopedics and sports world since then. Started my own business a couple months ago. I have a mobile concierge practice. So what that pretty much means is I treat folks in their home and bring all my equipment with me. So I see a range of adults ranging from anywhere between 40 years old up to 75 years old. Orthopedic injuries, more so the active type. So people that may be trying to get back to playing, competitive golf, competitive pickleball, tennis, running, biking, just kind of things that maybe at a traditional clinic they wouldn't be able to get back to, but I provide them one-on-one care in their home and, prioritize those kind of athletic goals for them.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. I mean, athletes are, for me, I find athletes to be like the most pliable. Usually people that are not very athletic are a little bit less sticky to kind of do the process, which is kind of nice. One of the primary reasons why I personally started doing like the FRC principles, which was kind of functional range conditioning, which was designed by a physical therapist, was because of jiu-jitsu. I've always been into fitness. I've always been into the big muscle building stuff, which is great. But as I've gotten older, power is important, but I feel like joint capacity is more important. And it's very difficult for people to understand that. So how would you explain it? I remember when I first started, it was all about vanity when it came to like working out. And now I think it's more about structural fortitude. And then whatever that looks like is what it looks like. So the structural fortitude is for like whatever activity you're going to do. So the benefit, at least I think with what you do, outside of like when you're injured, if you do some of the stuff that you do prior to you getting injured, it makes you more efficient for whatever sport. So not even just for jiu-jitsu. I think it's just for every sport.
Yeah, I mean, you want to prime your body for whatever you're doing, whether it be a sport or even a daily activity like yard work. You kind of want to be prepared to do that. So for example, I mean, people think of, joint range of motion. I mean, the easy one to think of is reaching overhead. Like there's so many people out there that have desk jobs and they're sitting all day long, and like there's probably some days that they don't even reach overhead. So if they're not utilizing that range of motion on a daily basis, I mean, as much as I don't like to use the phrase use it or lose it, it does kind of stand true in that situation. Cause then like I have clients that like, I'll ask them, can I see you reach overhead with both hands? And they'll have a deficit from side to side.
Yeah,
And
they're like this. You're like,
ask,
that's
yeah,
not a range of motion. Like,
exactly. And they're like, that's as high as I need to reach. I'm like, your shoulder should be able to go higher though. Like that's far from textbook normal. And like, and it does get in the way of their daily living. It's just that they've modified for so long and they're, compensating that they don't think that that's the reason they're in pain or that's the reason they're limited when, until I kind of point that out to them.
yeah, and I noticed that a lot also too with a little bit younger people, especially when it comes to lifting. It's like they'll do like a 300-pound squat, but then they don't really know how to squat. You're like, dude, like you're barely squatting with no weight on, and then
Yeah.
you're gonna add 300 pounds because you're young and you're full of testosterone, and you're able to push the weight. It's like that's gonna cause problems down the road. And I've seen it. I've been in the fitness industry long enough now that I don't think I haven't met one person that that's been working out that hasn't at one time or another did something stupid in their lifting to get injured of some sort. And it's just because this principle or this methodology, I guess you can call it, is I think it's relatively new. I mean, I would say the functional range conditioning stuff. I think he started like maybe 10 years ago, maybe. Before that, there was like people they still don't even understand when I say mobility. They think yoga, and I'm like, no, that's not what this is. This is we're joint strength training, and then the
Right.
side effect is your range of motion gets increased.
And it's not just warm up stuff. It's like it's a full body workout. It'll take you the time that it takes to get through. Think of like a bodybuilding strength training session. Like you need to put in the time to get your joints moving and keep them healthy, get the nutrition flowing. It's so important. I mean, I'm sure we can both speak from experience, and we probably both did some heavy lifting when we were younger, and had our aches and pains. And I've had things catch up with me. I mean, I have chronic knee pain that I've been dealing with for like 7 years now. Most recently, I had a shoulder surgery last year just from heavy pressing and lifting with my ego for so many years. I mean, I went to school for all this, and I got smart before I hit my 40s. But
and you still did it.
I had my fun. I mean, nothing beats heavy lifting. There's something about it that's just
Yeah,
fun.
100%. Listen, I can't look. There's a guy I train with now. He's young. He's 20, and his jujitsu is actually getting. He's a competitor too. His jujitsu is actually getting a little worse because my coach wanted him to start lifting a little bit just for strength, but then he fell in love with lifting, and so now he's put on like about 20 pounds of muscle. Over the last, I would say, like year and a half, and now his jiu-jitsu is like struggling a little bit because he's just heavier. And I'm like, okay, man, and I can't blame him. He's 20. I remember when I was 20. When you're 20, there's no better high than like,
yeah.
I lifted 300 pounds.
It's funny that you say that because like you think of other sports, like certain sports have carryover to other sports, but with bodybuilding, like I feel like the bigger you get aesthetically and whatever, the more powerful you get if that's your thing as well. Like the carryover to other sports, it's so independent of other sports versus like if you're getting good at something like jiu-jitsu, there's other martial arts that you're going to be good at as well, just because there's so similarities. But with bodybuilding, it's like I feel like so many people that they have the big muscles and they're able to go into the gym and lift heavy weights, but then like I'll test their mobility and like their flexibility is just trash.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's also I also think it's also like a male thing too. I see it a lot because of the jiu-jitsu community is like 90% men. So it's like they don't take the time. Like women are a little bit more apt to do that, a little bit more to do yoga. They're a little bit more to do like meditation. They're a little bit more apt to do that kind of stuff. Where men have a little bit more of a reluctance, unless they're like an athlete that was being an athlete when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. What I've noticed now is the athletes that are like high-level athletes, by the time they're in their early 20s, they've usually been training since they were like 15 years old, and they taught their body how to move efficiently before it solidified itself in adulthood. So what ends up happening is that then all of a sudden they just continue that, like those ranges of motions that they did when they were a kid, because their body learned how to do it when they were a kid. So you're able to kind of, they see the importance of it because, and maybe you can explain why. There's sometimes like I don't know if it's like a soreness, or let's say you have like X amount of range of motion, and you work that range of motion. The exercise is being worked in this range of motion. Well, the next day you feel like, I wouldn't necessarily say pain, but it's like this genuine like fatigue of like, man, I feel tight.
Yeah.
And it's not like it, like I was explaining it to one of the guys. I go, look, man, this girl actually who was very limber. And she's like, oh, my hamstrings are really tight. You know, she's like, hey, can you show me some of the stretch for hamstrings? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you actually need to stretch. Like from what you're telling me, it's just that you're very limber and your leg is working in a range of motion that it's not used to actually working in because you're actually limber. That fatigue or that discomfort that you're feeling or the lack of flexibility is just soreness. It's just a different type of soreness than what you normally feel when you like lift actual weights.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
It's just me extrapolating. This is me thinking of it like logically, like, okay, let me take a science here. That makes sense. That makes sense. My deduction is this, but I don't know. I'm just taking an educated guess.
Yeah, no, I can give you a prime example of that. So like obviously I work with a lot of patients who've had shoulder surgery, and with the surgeons they'll give us like a specific protocol. So it's like the first 4 weeks you can only go to 120 degrees overhead, and then after that, you can go to 150 degrees. So like when I add that 30 degrees at that 4 week mark, and like I'm pushing the patients into those 30 degrees, it's like a couple sessions before that they may have been kind of getting used to things, not getting as sore, and then like boom, we add 30 degrees and they're sore all over again.
And that's the one thing that I try to teach people, that there's a lot of range of motion is just basically creating a larger range of motion where the muscle tissue now has to work in a larger range, and that's what you're working out. And that's basically what physical therapy is to the simplest form of it.
Oh yeah, sure.
Obviously there's more complexity to it, but the simplest form is you now had an injury and your range of motion used to be here. Now it's here. So I'm going to work those little 10 or 15 degrees until you get back to this range of motion. And then we try to push the range of motion. Then we try to push the range of motion. And then you're actively, and you're teaching the nervous system and the muscle tissue that it has access to whatever the muscle or the joint, the capsule has.
Yeah, especially because it's just kind of building those connections between your brain and your sensors, and both motor and sensory receptors, that I have this new range, like get used to it, like we're going to be working in it. And that's why your muscles get sore, something it's not.
100%. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing with jiu-jitsu guys, there's a few things. So knees. So the knees over toes guy, I'm sure that you've heard of him, the knees over toes guy. The knees over toes guys like regimen is like vital to the jiu-jitsu guy. The reason being is because we play a particular position, our knees are in like maximal flexion. And so what happens is most of us don't have maximal flexion. Like we're used to like maybe 100, 120 degrees or whatever it is, or excuse me, maybe like 30. I was thinking the opposite direction. Maybe like 30 to like 20 degrees. It's that last little 10 or 15 where that you're almost like you feel like your knee is going to kind of pop a little bit. And what I try to tell people, and it's really difficult for people to understand that even though the knee is a hinge joint and it does this, technically it does rotation as well. And what limits the last little bit of like 10 or 15 degrees, it's not the actual hinge part, it's the rotational stuff.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell people, like in the FRC thing, he uses the term cars. I don't know if that's like a physical therapy term. Is that a physical therapy term, or is that his term?
I thought it was an FRC term.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if he took it from physical therapy, but if he made that FRC term, which is a cars. Cars, for anybody watching, cars is controlled articular rotations, which just basically means the largest possible range of motion for one particular joint, whatever that joint is, whether it's your phalanges, which is your fingers, whether it's your wrist, whether it's your elbow, whatever it is. It's whatever the maximal range of motion is, and then try to teach the body that it has that range of motion. So I tell people like, hey man, you guys should be doing like cars on a consistent basis for your knees. Before you actually train, prep the rotation of your knee. Rotate it, rotate it, rotate it, rotate it, rotate it. So that when you do get into that maximal flexed position, you're less likely to feel discomfort, you're less likely to feel pain. And I tell people like even me, well, I'm actually pretty active with it. There's certain spots where I almost feel like, you know how when your knuckle gets like stuck
Mm-hmm.
and like your knuckle's about to like pop, but you feel like that minor sense of instability, like, is it going to pop or am I going to break something?
Are you talking about like the tibial ER and IR, like right?
Yes, yes. So it's like, and I'll be like in knee flexor, or I'll be sitting on my calves, and I'll have to like sit from side to side on my butt, and I'll feel that rotation, and I'll feel like, oh, 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 and again, if I don't warm up and prep my knee, then I feel like, oh, I'm in danger, and that's where the older guys get hurt in jiu-jitsu, is because they don't take the step back and go, okay, man, like slow it down. They want to use all their muscle, and then they get into the position where they're in maximal knee flexion, and then bah, boom, there goes their meniscus, just because they didn't properly warm up in order for them to do that. But what are things that you could do for the knee that'll kind of maybe mitigate that?
Oh, I love the knees over toes stuff. So, like I said, I've been dealing with chronic knee pain in both my knees, my left worse than my right, since 2015. So about 7 years now. And obviously, I was turned on to knees over toes during the pandemic when he got really popular. And I've actually been working with one of the ATG certified coaches in Orlando for the past like 5 months. And honestly, like I've worked with coaches before. Obviously, I'm humble enough to know, like, even as a physical therapist, like having an outside point of view and accountability is priceless. So I have people that I work with myself, and he's the third person I've worked with. He worked with Ben Patrick directly in Clearwater, but his gym's out in Orlando. He's changed my knees, man. Like I don't have knee pain anymore because of the stuff I do with him. So obviously it's a lot of backward sledding. I mean, I love backward sledding so much. It's just like so rejuvenating and nutritious for your knees. All those step down variations. And then like the VMO squats on the slant board, the ATG split squats, just getting that full knee bend. So then you were saying, like, you know, when you get in that last bit, you kind of feel that like pressure. It's like something in a range you haven't been into before. Like when I first started doing those ATG split squats, like I was like, this is not the most comfortable thing. But then like as I got used to it and the more and more I did it, like I got used to that pressure and like I don't feel anymore. And I just love having my knee in that range because it's like something that mentally I was so scared of before. But now that I can have it, it's like I want to be there every day. I want to like know I still have it and maintain it over time. So I'm hooked on the knees over toes.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff is basically knee extension. So it's basically what it is.
Yeah, I mean it's been around for a while. It's nothing new. He's just popularized it and made it like
and he made it which is it is nothing new, but he made it like the core of his program, which I like. So it's like a lot of it. At least that's how I lift. So I do like the FRC stuff as not necessarily a warm up, but in other words, if I'm going to do legs, I do hip, I do knee, I do ankle, and I do some form of like max FRC lifting, isometric lifting for each joint. And then from there, I do full range of motion for all three joints, which is like butt to calf kind of squats. And then I'll do 3 or 4 rounds of that. And then I move on to actual external load. Then I'll actually do squat, deadlift. And then I'll do only, it's a little different with jiu-jitsu athletes because you can't really train for hypertrophy in jiu-jitsu. The downfall I've noticed, and again, this is just me from all the information I've learned and just from practical application. I've noticed that training for hypertrophy is dangerous because it's too much stress on the actual muscle tissue. So what ends up happening is that if you train for hypertrophy, you're going to obviously, let's say you do chest, your chest is going to be sore. It's all your pectoral, it's all your shoulder joint muscle. It's a little bit of your tricep, your bicep, which supports your shoulder. So now you're doing jujitsu, and now someone gets an armbar on you, and you now have to resist the armbar in order for them to not get the armbar. And now your whole shoulder girdle is compromised because everything is so fatigued from micro trauma from the lifting that you run the risk of actually getting injured because your muscle tissue can't support the actual the submission or the attempted submission. So I noticed now I've actually changed how I lift a little bit, and so how I lift now is more. I don't know if you ever heard the 5-3-1, the Windler 5-3-1 method, which is kind of like okay, what I did was I took that and I kind of modified it a little bit, but the same principle where I do the FRC stuff first, you prep each individual joint, Then I do full body range of motion lifting. Then I do external load, but then I'm keeping the reps kind of low and I'm going up to like 80, 85% of the max. So that way I challenge my nervous system. I challenge the power, but it's not really micro trauma to the actual muscle tissue. It's more trauma to my nervous system. And trauma to my nervous system, that heals pretty quickly, like very, very quickly, which I'm actually amazed because I've taken some FRC classes where I'm spent, like I'm exhausted. Like I sleep like 10 hours the next day because I'll go to like a specific class. But then the next day, it's like I feel like $1 million. You're like, what the fuck? Like I literally was like crippled yesterday. And from my understanding, the nervous system just heals a whole lot faster than muscle tissue. So however long it takes muscle, it's like a third of the time for your nervous system to recover. So that's kind of how I kind of changed it to where I'm killing all birds with one stone. I'm doing the prep work for each individual joint. I'm doing body mechanic movement where I'm doing my full range of motion. So it's a little bit more functional. Like, hey, I need you to sit down and stand all the way up. Sit down, stand all the way up. Do 4 sets of that. And then I do the actual heavy lifting where I'm lifting, boom. I'm a little tender, but it's very superficial and more like over the whole belly of the muscle, and it's more like an area of my body instead of like specifically my quads or specifically my glutes or specifically my hamstring. It's more like, man, everything from my waist down is worn out.
Would you say jiu-jitsu athletes train like that? That's where they're doing more like high load, low volume?
No, they don't.
Okay.
No, which I think is also a little bit of a problem as well. Unless they're like a CrossFit person, because you get those are the anomalies, or the super athletes before they get in jiu-jitsu. Because what I've noticed is the CrossFit guys, since they've already gotten used to taxing their body so much, then like jiu-jitsu is just another workout for them. But it's when someone is like doing jiu-jitsu and they're trying to add in like a weight room, like kind of regiment, some type of strength component of it. What they end up doing is I've noticed they end up doing like more like bodybuilding style workouts, or they're trying to do a CrossFit workout. And the combination of the two is just too taxing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, unless you had that previous baseline where it's like, all right, I was already fit, I was already a high level wrestler, or I was already like a committed CrossFitter, I was already a committed bodybuilder, or some whatever sport it was before, and now I'm adding jiu-jitsu as an additional athletic component. But what I've noticed is that if you try to do both and you're not phenomenal at one, it's very difficult to manage the two. That you have to kind of like cut back, and you got to decide which one is your heavy lifting. For me, my heavy lifting is jiu-jitsu. So all my weightlifting, all my joint stuff, all my cardio stuff, everything is just to supplement or support the foundational work of the actual jiu-jitsu. So when I lift, I'm lifting for power because I don't care about sustained strength. I care about, oh man, I'm in trouble. I need to get out of this immediately.
Yeah. And
I can He-Man my way out of it because I got enough power behind it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense for sure. I'm sure you do some kind of cardiovascular endurance work as well.
Yeah, one thing that I learned from the FRC that totally made sense to me, actually, that I was just like, okay, that makes sense. He was saying that because jiu-jitsu is high interval training, or combat sports in general, it's high interval training. Like, why are you going to do high interval cardio when you're doing high interval training as your sport? It doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense for you to do longer endurance training on the days that you're not doing jiu-jitsu or the combat sport, because what you're doing is you're building overall muscle tissue of the heart by doing the endurance in combination with the interval training, so that 6 months to a year from now, when you continue doing the interval training, as long as you're doing the endurance training, now the endurance training builds the size of the heart, and then the interval training is building the power of each stroke of the heart. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Because before it was just in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, if I'm doing interval training, then I'm doing interval training. You know what I mean? Why do more interval training? You know what I'm saying?
Right, for sure. No, if I'm going to do cardio, I try to do HIIT training anyway.
Yeah, but see, that's because, you don't do jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, imagine doing, the best way I describe it is, imagine if I do like straightaway sprints. Straightaway sprints, jog the curve like on a track. Straightaway sprint, jog the curve. Straightaway sprint, jog the curve for 6 to 8 minutes at a time. It's rough. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So another issue that I see a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys have is hip flexion, very limited hip flexion. So what is it that you've noticed with people, and what is it that major issue with most people's hip movement?
Now, are you saying in like positions on the floor or with kicking and things?
Just in general.
Okay. So a lot of times if there's not something actually going on anatomically, whether it be kind of, outside the joint or inside the joint, I mean, issues like that can be, whether it be the actual joint itself, whether it be the capsule, the labrum, because all those kind of pathologies are going to kind of present as anterior hip pain right in the front. So obviously you need imaging to specifically diagnose it. But as far as like things I'd be working on, capsular mobility. So, with the super bands where it's tied up and you have it kind of attached to the front of your hip, and then you're kind of in a quadruped position on all fours and just like letting the band pull in the opposite direction. And then you're just kind of working different angles that kind of feel good just to kind of get the band and get that those mobilizations through the hip. That's something I do before squatting. I mean, my squat depth is not the best. I definitely have a difficult time getting below parallel. But if I kind of work my hip before doing that, I get way less pinching in the front of the hip and I can actually go deeper. So I think warming up with some joint mobilizations with a band, it's a great thing to work on. But another thing that, knees over toes guy kind of introduced me to was the reverse squats. I don't know if you've seen that one, the one where you're lying on your back and you have the straps on your feet and then you're kind of bringing both. It's kind of like a knee bend, but you're laying on your back with resistance, like attached to a cable column.
Okay.
So that one's really good, just for building kind of power and being able to kind of lift up your knee really fast.
Okay. What I've noticed with a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys is because jiu-jitsu is all flexion, hip flexion, everything's tight. What I've noticed is they get what a sedentary person gets. They get that upper and lower cross syndrome, kind of quite a bit, for different reasons. For the person that's sedentary is because of its lack of activity. And I feel like the jiu-jitsu guys, it's because there's too much activity. So you can actually see my jiu-jitsu fingers here. Like I got flat knuckles, okay? And that's a common jiu-jitsu thing. Now the reason why is because when you grip, it's all flexion. So like for me, let's see this hand. Like the last little bit of 10 degrees or so is very difficult for me.
Yeah.
So I have to do opposing muscles. So I constantly do pails and rails for the opposite for my extensors because my flexors are constantly being overworked from me holding on to grips. I feel like that's the same thing with the hip as well. So what I've noticed is people have very limited internal rotation of the hip, very limited internal rotation, lack of communication, external rotation of the hip. And then because of that, they're in a constant state of flexion. So I feel like they get a lot of like almost like impacted joints. Mm-hmm. So where they're forcing the hip into excessive flexion, but then since they don't have the rotation, there's just not enough space for their hip to move. And then what ends up happening is then their back has to take up the difference, and then they start complaining that their back hurts. It's like, oh, it's my back.
Yeah, one in hips and low back people is like I tell people, hips are supposed to be a mobile area. Your low back is supposed to be a stable area. So if your hips are not mobile, not flexible, you're not getting what you need out of them, your back's going to have to start doing jobs it's not meant to be doing. And over time, that's when you run into trouble. And that's why back pain can present, but it's an actual hip issue.
Yeah, and it's hard for people to get that. It's hard for people to understand that. And I've tried to tell them like multiple times, like, listen, guy, you got to work on your hip. I know you feel the pain in your back. Right. It's not your back. You got to work on your hip. Your hip is not functioning as a hip. If it doesn't function as a hip, something's got to make up the difference. Like something. What is the hip attached to? It's attached to your spine, dude. Yeah. If you're complaining about your lower back, what the fuck? Your body, you're helping. It's like a lot of times when people have a knee problem, it's not always. Let me make sure I disclaim that. Not always, But usually when something has a pain in their knee, it's usually not their knee. It's usually something in their hip or something in their foot. You got you really got really shitty feet. You got like no dexterity in your toes. You got really horrible dorsiflexion, and then you wonder why your knee is hurting. It's not because it's that your foot's not being a foot.
Yeah. I mean, rarely do you have an injury where, you know, the injury is caused by that specific part and you don't have to look above or below the chain. I mean, if I don't look below or above the chain for someone, I'm doing them a disservice, because I can, you know, someone comes in with a knee injury, I can get after the knee all day and, you know, maybe I'll, you know, help them manage their pain, but, you know, it's not going to solve the issue. I have to look above, and I go out even as high as for rotational sports. I'll look at, you know, thoracic spine and all that stuff, because, you know, you're not just a knee, you're not just a low back, you're a whole person.
Yeah, that's the thoracic back is very time consuming. It takes it takes a long time. I'm still working on it. Like I'm still, because there's some spots. I'm at the level now in my jiu-jitsu where I'm training with like a lot of high level guys, and the high level guys, I told you, they start when they're young, and so their body is very pliable. And so one of the biggest things, sometimes I'm in some compromising spots, and I can feel that my limitation is that my thoracic spine is limited. Like my rib cage and my thoracic is not able to twist as much as it should. And then I have to give up a position because I can feel like, oh crap, I'm like hitting the wall here. I can't, even though I'm telling myself, relax, 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 I can't relax. And then I just have to give the position, because if not, I'm going to end up hurting myself. So that one, I tell people, is very time consuming. That and feet and thoracic are like the most time consuming, I feel like, joints. I feel like you get very good gains from your hip, pretty good gains if you're diligent on your knees. But I feel like the ones that are time consuming is your feet and your thoracic spine.
Sure.
Especially for, I've also noticed that, like, I don't know if you can notice, but my actual, like, this is it. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just me. It's just a jiu-jitsu thing.
Yeah.
It's just because we're protecting our heads, so we're like this all the time. You know what I mean? So it's like there's very limited rotation because we're protecting our cervical spine from all the movement. So it's one of the things that I kind of work on, but it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. It's not even like it's not even that it's difficult. It's uncomfortable to actually like sit there and be patient, to be able to break up that tension that you have when you walk like this, especially if it's combat sports and the guy is a striker. Even more so, they're even more rounded. Yeah, they're like this because you're protecting your face, you know, and you're protecting your head. And if you get clipped in the face, you've got to have enough muscle structure to like take the blow if you get hit in the face.
Right.
Yeah.
Say
that again.
I never thought about that. That's like almost a benefit, is to, you know, you got to be like that in the sport, like during the action.
But 100%. Yeah.
Not the most functional to not be able to, you know, look out your car window.
That's true. That for me is difficult. I have to turn my whole body around.
Exactly.
Real talk. The last thing I want to talk about is a little bit of the shoulder. So a lot of the shoulder issues that I've seen so far is with the teres minor. Really overworked teres minor. Really overworked lat. And I want to say, I don't know if it's called dislocation. It's not really called dislocation.
Subluxation?
Yes, it's like an impact where the acromia here will kind of almost detach.
Okay.
And we'll have like, it literally will be sticking out.
Yeah.
And then what will end up happening is that there's nothing you can do. It's one of those, like every person that I've met that have it, they'll have, you know, they're not, whatever whatever that section is called, where it literally will be like a big, like this, and it's because they separated their shoulder. They're separating the shoulder, but there's nothing they can do because there's no surgery, there's no nothing. As long as there's no pain associated with it, you just have to ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's nothing you can do for that, right?
Yeah, unless it's surgery, that would be the only option, honestly. If there's an actual like deformity there, yeah. Yeah,
right. Because I've known like several guys, and it's from falling. Basically, you get thrown, and you fall a little wrong, and boom, all of a sudden you just literally just the impact of your own weight just literally pops the shoulder out. And then all of a sudden there's no actual injury to the rotator cuff, but there's a detachment at that one joint area right here on the, I forget what it's called here, the top end of it here.
The acromioclavicular joint, yeah.
AC joint. There you go. Yeah, exactly. So there's like just a little bit of a detachment, and then there's an inflammation. They wait for the inflammation to calm down, and then that detachment, it kind of has like a little bit of a separation like that, and then you have a little bit of a funky looking shoulder.
Yeah, it's ligamentous, so it's not contractile. So once it's stretched out, it's stretched out.
Yeah. All right. So now I know for sure that that's something that, like, what if you get that? Sorry, dude. There's nothing you can do. Yeah. And so what are things that people can do for the a lot of people would be like, oh, my shoulders are stiff, and I feel like it's not your shoulder, it's the teres minor and the lat.
So get the lacrosse ball and get uncomfortable, man. But you have to be consistent with stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with those kind of techniques where it's like you'll pin a certain area and then you'll work on some overhead motion, whether it be laying down your back or kind of standing up, but it's not comfortable. Like, I've done stuff like that before, and like, if you're consistent with it, you can see some improved mobility in the soft tissue, but you really have to do it every day.
Yeah. And I try to tell people too, the soft tissue is great, but not by itself. People have a tendency to, because like I offer sports massages as well, and the guy does jiu-jitsu, but he's also kind of like a mobility FRC guy as well. So the beautiful thing about him is that he goes, okay, man, this is what your problem is, but you also need to do this, because his goal is for you not to go see him anymore.
Oh, for sure. I have an active approach to everything I do. I mean, I think modalities and, hands-on manual work has its place if you can get us further in the session, if it can kind of inhibit your pain to allow you to do more. But by no means do I think it's going to be the solution to your problem. I utilize it when I have to, but, corrective exercises and strength training is what I get after. So like something that I would kind of prescribe to someone in addition to doing some of the other crossball work, an exercise I really love is kind of, you can do it with a dumbbell or you can do it with a easy bar. It's kind of just, with your arms straight in front of you, laying down on the bench and just kind of doing a pullover really, really slow. So it'd be like, letting the weight kind of fall back. You'll get it.
Yeah, you're getting the eccentric contraction from the lats.
So it's pretty much shoulder flexion, but eccentrically, and you're getting a really good lat stretch, especially if you try to keep your back flat and keep the ribs tucked down. You'll really isolate more to your upper quarter.
Actually, that's actually thinking about that. I feel like the lat is somewhat like the hamstring a little bit. I feel like a lack of flexibility in the hamstring is not lack of flexibility. It's lack of eccentric contraction at the hamstring.
For sure.
So a lot of people don't realize that it's the controlled, because like you were saying with the lat, it's not so much the lat pull down, it's the controlling the eccentric part as far as you can, and then being able to kind of pull it back up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually, I didn't even think of that, because that's a good cue as well. So for the shoulder guys, whoever's watching here, you want to do like eccentric motion for the Latissimus dorsi, but like slow eccentrics. So It's not about banging out reps, guys. It's about trying to go as far as you comfortably can within your range of motion, whatever that range of motion is, under load. So it should be feeling fatigued. And the slower you go, you're teaching the nervous system like, hey, fire, I need you to contract here. I need you to contract here. I need you to contract here, so that you control the descent, which reduces your injury, reduces your risk, increases your range of motion. Same thing with your hamstring. A lot of your guys' hamstring discomfort or lack of flexibility is not lack of flexibility. It's lack of eccentric, which means lengthening of the muscle tissue. There's a contraction that shortens, there's a contraction that doesn't change, and there's a contraction that lengthens. Guys, where most of you guys suck is the lengthening part. Mm-hmm. So you got to learn how to control the lengthening, especially when it comes to the hamstring and when it comes to the lat and the teres minor. So for you guys that having a lot of shoulder aches and pains, or like another one that you guys will feel when you feel the shoulder aches and pains, because I get it too sometimes, is back here on the upper, like the trapezius area, like above in the middle of your like mid trap area. What that is, guys, is the same principle. Is your lat and your teres minor basically pulling everything forward, okay? Because you have tense here, and it's causing these muscles to contract back here, and you're feeling the discomfort back here. It's not here. It feels good when somebody comes and gives you your massage here, and you're like, oh, yeah, it feels fucking amazing. But you ain't fixing shit. You're just giving yourself a nice lollipop, which everybody likes candy. The shit's not good for you. So you got to understand, eccentric motion, working on your lat and your teres minor, like Dr. Komfort said, as well as with the hamstring as well. So if you feel like you got tight hamstrings and you got a tight shoulder girdle, most likely it's eccentric of the hamstring, eccentric contraction of the lat and the teres minor, guys. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, because just recently we've had a few of like some high-level jiu-jitsu guys hurt their spine, man, from falling. Like bad. Like there's one kid who was a high-level competitor. It's absolutely catastrophic. 23 years old, like literally paralyzed. He broke his one of his cervical spine. I don't know if it was C5, C6. Like he cracked it. They had to do like emergency surgery, and so he's like partially paralyzed. And so he's right now in rehab, and he's doing all this stuff. And it was just like a freak accident. It's one of those things that just happened. My coach actually basically did the same thing. He was kind of being playful with some teenager, and he was doing some takedowns. And bro, he was like maybe 6 inches off the mat, and he just lightly hit the mat, and he just hit it like at that perfect angle that you could see his whole body stiffen up. And boom, he went limp for like a second. And luckily, my coach was just like a jab. He basically punched his nervous system. His nervous system got panicked, froze everything, all the muscles around his neck, his face. The muscle was like basically pulling back his face. And he was like this for like almost like where he couldn't move, like basically like a whiplash. And luckily him, it wasn't too bad. The other kid was definitely bad. He's never gonna be the same. The kid that basically like broke his back, even though he's moving, he's partially paralyzed. You can see that he's atrophied. His muscles have atrophied tremendously, and he's doing a lot of physical therapy. And you can see that he's getting better, which I think in a year or two he's going to be functioning. He's going to be walking. He's going to be running by himself. He's never going to go back to the way he was before, because he was a high level, like he was ranked number 4 in the world at brown belt, and I don't think that's going to happen again. So what are things that you think that can kind of like, I wouldn't say necessarily avoid it, but could possibly help reduce the risk of something like that actually happening? Because a lot of it is just accident, where it's like lack of flexibility, where you hurt your spine, upper spine, what?
If it's a freak accident like that, it's unfortunate, but obviously spine health is super important. And, we were talking about cars earlier, and, cars for your spine, doing Jefferson curls. Have you heard of those?
No, describe those.
Where it's pretty much you're standing up. You can do it weighted or unweighted. You don't need anything heavy. Like right now I do it with like a 40-pound or a 50-pound barbell, and pretty much you're just spinal flexion. So you're starting all the way up from your neck.
Yeah, I call them, yeah. I call them rolling good mornings. That's the way I call them.
Exactly. So it's like, people think of spinal flexion and they'll see someone doing a deadlift with some bent in their lumbar spine. They think it's a bad thing, but this is actually, you're supposed to do this with this exercise. You're supposed to, curl your entire back. Think of it one segment at a time, work super slow to the point where, you're all the way down low. You're getting a pretty gnarly hamstring stretch, and then work in reverse one segment at a time.
That's one thing that I've never actually done is done that stuff under load, because I've been focusing on just the range of motion and not the strength under range of motion.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of range of motion where I do like spinal rotation. In jiu-jitsu, you do what's called inverted, where your legs are going over your head, kind of like dolphin pose in yoga. I don't know if you've ever done yoga before. Kind of like dolphin pose, but we do that for what's called retaining guard in jiu-jitsu. So I do a lot of like that spinal flexion where I get comfortable in that position where my body is used to carrying the weight of my legs. And then I try to segment my spine as I kind of come down. And then I do a lot of cat-cows, like excessive amount of cat-cows, thoracic cat-cows, lumbar cat-cows, regular cat-cows, like again and again and again and again and again, because like one of the things that I've noticed is it's just a rep thing like anything else. You got to endurance train the shit. And especially when it comes to the spine. And I tell people the spine is, it's the hub for your communication for the rest of your body. So of course it's going to be more rigid because it's protecting the communication cables for the rest of your body. So if you don't do thousands of reps, your body's not going to budge because it's protecting itself.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with the thoracic spine. It's just inherently stiff. So you have to really get after it to see a small difference even.
Yeah. Cool, man. That's about it. There's not much else. I kind of covered all bases. I know that
Awesome.
you got another appointment to go to, so I don't want to hold you up either.
For sure.
Tell people where to find you, man. How do they find you? If they have questions.
NewHorizonsRehabilitation.com. It's my Instagram handle as well, and also my Facebook page. I take online clients as well through telehealth. But Central Florida, driving all over the place right now. I'm not really picky, just trying to find people that are motivated and want to work with me.
Okay.
So, yep, online. I drop educational information almost weekly. So, yeah, I'd love to be in touch with anyone who's looking for some rehab help.
Yeah, I would listen, guys. Anybody that's watching, okay. Most of you guys, I know you jiu-jitsu athletes. I'm gonna look straight at the camera because I'm talking to you. Is most of you guys will not go see a goddamn doctor. So this is a good way for you to do like an online visit with a physical therapist that you can say, oh man, I really hurt this. And then the physical therapist is going to tell you, yeah, it's a problem. Go see an actual doctor, or here's some stuff that you can do by yourself. Go see this guy. That's what you want to do. Don't guess. I know that your ego will get in the way and you'll be like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to allow it to heal. Listen, I've been there myself, but don't do that. The idea is go see a professional. Go at least pay the time for them to give you a little bit of like educated advice. So instead of you just assuming or going on Google and thinking that you know what the problem is, go see someone and say, hey man, this is the pain. This is why it happened. What do you think? And then someone who is a lot smarter than you is going to tell you, yes, this is what you should do. Go see that person. So I would highly recommend for something, especially online, guys. You don't need to go see, most of you guys don't need to go see a physical therapist and go do the whole process or go to an orthopedic person most of the time. I would say 90% of the time, you don't need to do that. But go see someone so they can tell you whether you actually need to do all that shit. Because if they can tell you, hey, you should go do this, then go see an orthopedic. The orthopedic then is going to send you to an actual physical therapy, and then you're going to actually do work to maybe avoid doing surgery, or if you might actually need surgery. Okay, guys? So New Horizons, what is it again?
NewHorizonsRehabilitation.com.
NewHorizonsRehabilitation.com. You can also find them on LinkedIn. Connect with them. Do a little session with them if you need it. And then let us know, man. Daniel,
Right.
I appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Loved it.
You be good, brother. Give me 1
Right.
second. Let me do the little outro so that way we kind of go with the brand here. And then we'll talk. Give me 1 second, boss.